53,000 people hospitalized, 10,500 people in ICUs.
All gyms, bars, and restaurants must stop in-person service by 10 p.m.
Last count, we had 143,000 infections in a single day.
How did it end up like this again? Just a couple of months ago, it felt like the curve was flattening. States were opening up again. People were going back to some form of normality. But now, we are on the brink of another shutdown. With every new day, the U.S. is setting new single-day records, and we are showing no signs of slowing down. In order to understand the situation, this project hopes to answer two central questions. How did the government respond to the coronavirus, and in what ways, if any, did the Trump administration negatively affect the coronavirus outbreak? The government's response can be split into two categories: legal actions and public perception. This video, however, focuses on public perception of the coronavirus and how Trump's actions may have changed the way people view the severity of the coronavirus. In order to get a good feel of how people perceive the coronavirus and how Trump would affect the way people thought about coronavirus, I conducted two interviews. One interview with
I'm Nicholas Karchmer. I'm 18, and I live in Rhinebeck, and I currently work with the public.
and the other with
My name is Alan Prado. I went to high school with Billy in Rhinebeck. I go to school in Salem now, Massachusetts.
These interviews are two of my main primary sources for this project. The first question I asked to gain perspective on how they feel about coronavirus was,
How cautious am I when it comes to coronavirus?
So how cautious am I when it comes to coronavirus?
I'm pretty cautious at work. I'm always wearing my mask. Whenever I'm out of the house, I'm really wearing my mask. And I keep Lysol wipes in my car, so I like the gas pump and shit. Always wipe my hands off and everything.
I'd say I'm pretty cautious. I wear my mask because the school requires it. I wash my hands when I go to the bathroom. I'm not over the top with it. I'm not over the top with the guidelines at all. I just wear my mask and social distance if it's crowded, but I'm not too worried.
So I would say reasonably cautious.
as expected, both Alan and Nick claimed to be cautious about the coronavirus. When I asked the second question, both gave similar answers as well.
How well has the Trump administration handled it?
I feel that the Trump administration handled it as best as, any administration could.
I feel like they've done almost nothing, and while you could think that's a bad thing, I think it's kind of some sort of neutral.
I think he handled it better than most Democratic governors because I think it was more in the governor's hands and not so much on the president.
They didn't really help or hurt, in my opinion. They're kind of just, they didn't really affect it either way. They didn't really encourage any mask wearing or anything like that, but at the same time, they didn't really discourage it and all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of somewhere in the middle. They didn't really hurt or help much.
But is this the reality of it? Can we really put no blame on Trump and his administration for the outbreak? A series of tweets from April 17th would say otherwise. In this series of tweets, the president declared, "Liberate Michigan! Liberate Minnesota!" Two states whose Democratic governors had imposed strict social distancing restrictions. This call for liberation from social distancing rules followed protests around the country as protesters, many wearing Make America Great Again hats, congregated in packed groups around state capitals to demand those restrictions be lifted immediately. In the days following, the U.S. saw a sharp spike in cases to 36,000 cases on the 24th. The U.S. wouldn't see a spike like this until 2 months later on June 24th. There's no 100% certainty that these protests were a direct cause of this spike, but it is safe to assume that it was. Large groups of people gathering, not following social distancing guidelines, and not wearing masks only spells out a recipe for more people to get sick. These tweets encouraging people to protest gave the impression that the virus is not as serious as public health officials made it out to be. So as you can see, Nick's initial belief that Trump neither did anything good or bad is incorrect, because Trump encouraged actions that potentially caused a spike in cases. this project, I use articles from multiple news sources as my secondary sources. I use articles from the New York Times or CNN to gain a more full understanding of what I was trying to say, and help me draw a connection between my primary source tweets and the coronavirus. These are secondary sources I use and will need to use to continue this project are clips and news sources recorded on the coronavirus. Clips like from the protests or clips from testing. All of these sources I use to improve the quality of my video instead of using them as a reference guide. If I were to continue this project, I would need to record more interviews and make the questions more in-depth. I need to make the questions a little bit more open-ended to get a better response from my interviewees. But I'd also need to get more clips from the internet of coronavirus-related topics. By doing these things, I feel that I would be able to create a more complete and more fitting documentary. Thanks for watching.